Okay, and we are live. Welcome. Welcome, everybody. It is such an honor to be here. As always, I want to thank you so much for joining me. Today, we are going to be talking about a very exciting topic that I am so happy to be sharing with you guys because literally, I think it's the key to spiritual evolution. It is really the most powerful gateway, or you can call it a portal. It is the instrument for rapid awakening. Okay. And it's at the foundation of every spiritual work that you want to do. It comes down to this one thing. Okay. So, welcome everybody. Just saying hi to everybody on the chat. Mark Sanchez, you're on a bike ride. Awesome. Mark Sanchez, thank you for the super chat while you're riding your bike and watching this. That's so wonderful of you. Thank you so much. Fire Sign Sag, so ready for this? Yes, let's go. Josefa Savu, greetings. So great to see you. Guys, what a joy. I'm so happy to spend Friday night with you. It is so fun to be here. I'm excited to share. We have a lot to cover. And just a really quick shout out that if any of this information has been supportive to you, if it's been helpful to you, please do share this video with friends and family. And maybe they will learn something, or whoever you feel might benefit from some of these topics, because I know that they're really powerful topics and they actually can help, hopefully you and anyone else. So let's jump into it. Please do subscribe, share, like, and I'm super, super grateful for all of your super chats. It's such an honor, guys. All right, so my loves, today we are going to talk about the most powerful spiritual instrument that is, it's like a portal that enters you into the foundation and the roots of all the things that are underlying the deeper shadow work. And it is the hardest one because it is the most triggering, which is why we use the title Trigger Warning. It's really about triggers, everything to have to do with your triggers, every aspect psychological. We're going to talk about the psychology of triggers, the emotional element of triggers. We're going to talk about the biology of triggers, and we're going to talk about how it affects us in a spiritual, energetic way, pretty much getting into every element of triggers so we can understand deeply how to work with them. All right, guys. So as usual, I'm going to post all of these slides for you to receive inside the after posting of all of these events. If you go to my website, you are welcome to catch. Let me just come over here and show you guys the website really quickly. If you guys go to my website, you guys can access all of these replays in resources under 30 days of shadow. Okay. And then you're going to come over here, and every single time we post, it's all going to be here for you. So all the videos that we've done so far are all here. You guys can oops. You guys can replay and play. They'll automatically play with all the information for you to access. If you sign up for the replay of this on the website, you're also going to receive the slides. Okay. So for those of you that want to join with that, please do. All right, so let's get started, guys. Let's talk about the trigger, the number one key and the most powerful instrument that I have discovered to help you come into a state of clarity, awareness, awakening, faster than any other thing. Okay. And so let's talk a little bit about what are triggers, first of all. Okay. And as usual, please put your questions in capital letters below. I'll be super happy to answer them at the end. If they're in capital letters, so I can read them, so I can quickly find them and distinguish them from normal chat messages. Okay. All right. So what is trigger? Trigger, it's one of the most precise instruments available to self-knowledge. Because as soon as you understand your triggers, as soon as you can identify your triggers, you can find exactly where your blind spots are. We talked a little bit about blind spots last time. Okay, so the trigger is one of the most precise instruments. Ordinarily, we experience the trigger outwardly. It's the first point of our reactionary response. If someone speaks, someone withdraws, a boundary is crossed, recognition is held, we feel dismissed. Okay. We can feel abandoned. We can feel controlled, criticized, unseen, or betrayed. Attention immediately moves towards the person or circumstance that produces the reaction. And precisely there, the deeper information is often lost, right in the moment of reaction, rather than observing. The magnitude and the speed and particular quality of the internal reaction can reveal something way beyond the present event. A trigger is a point at which present reality makes contact with previous organized experience. For a moment, two times occupy the same body. Okay. So this is kind of what I really want you to kind of keep in mind. The trigger is a point in which present reality makes contact with the previous organized experience. So this is going to be the most important thing for you guys to keep remembering, that every time you experience a trigger in your life, in your any moment of your experience, you are immediately being taken back to a past point. We talked about the points that are suspended in the field yesterday. Okay, so I'm going to talk, this is the next step, right? What happens psychologically when you're triggered energetically, you are immediately drawn back to those points. Now, the point of entry into the portal of a trigger is through the emotional energetic body. Okay, so in this example, if someone speaks, someone withdraws, a boundary is crossed, recognition is held, let's say any one of these examples, we might feel dismissed, we might feel abandoned, we might feel controlled, we might feel unseen or criticized or betrayed. And every single one of these key trigger points is a vibrational frequency. It is an emotion that has a vibrational frequency, has a geometric structure. It has the entire energy system of the body is either contracted or expanded, depending on how you have experienced it the first time. The first time. So you're not really ever taken to only one time when it's happened. In your energy body, you're actually immediately going back to the very first time. And that is available. That information is available for you at that point. Okay. So let's talk about this. The trigger is a portal. Okay. The present provides the stimulus. The past provides provides the meaning, and the organism responds to both. Okay. So there's double information that is entering into the body, but the body is it's depleting that much life force. Okay. And again, this is another point for you to understand how the split of fragmentation is also occurring. Okay. So the stimulus is the real event in the present moment. It can be a word, it can be a silence, it can be a tone, a withdrawal. Okay, all of those are movements of life force that you are feeling through your multidimensional body. Keep in mind, triggers are multidimensional. You are multidimensional. So, when you enter a certain level of awareness, you become aware of emotionally. You can have a trigger through your feeling body. You can have a trigger through the muscle contractions in your body that you might not even be aware of. And this is what makes identifying triggers so difficult, that if you're very disconnected from your body, you won't be able to identify the stimulus immediately, the connections of that connective network of the stimulus immediately. It might take a lot of time because you don't realize that you're actually having a reaction to an experience. Okay. So the meaning, which is the interpretation drawn previously organized experiences shaped long before this moment. Okay. So this interpretation is essentially the meaning that you have applied to those previous experiences. Now, this is extremely important for you to understand in a trigger because again, this is the mechanism of a past. It's a mechanism of a past or a future because wherever your attention is most invested, you might be very invested in denying a potential future disaster, or you might be completely frozen in the repetition of a past. Okay, so energy dynamics there are contractive. Contractive, they are disorganized, they're creating disassociation, there's a level of disembodiment and disconnect. The meaning that you apply is an incomplete truth because it is based on something that you have experienced before. But as we know, past experiences are always incomplete truths, right? Okay, and the response, the organism reacts to both simultaneously. This is why reactions can exceed the apparent size of the event. Okay, so we talked about the split where we become disassociated, where we begin to feel fractalized. Okay, so that fractalization that's occurring is creating double an exertion of life force, as I mentioned. This is where the split occurs. So triggers are extremely depleting, and we're going to talk about the biology of that in a second, the energetics and the biology of that. This is just the entry into the topic. But you can imagine how much life force is being spent in an emotional trigger. Okay, emotional, energetic. It's energetic because the energy can either be emotional, it could be a thought, it could be a feeling, it could be the body of a contraction. Okay. The architecture beneath the reaction. Let's go a little deeper. When an event produces disproportionate emotional charge, do not begin by suppressing the reaction. Study its structure. Consider one event. Someone does not return your message. The external event is similar for everyone. The internal worlds are not entirely different. Are entirely different. Okay, so what does this mean? That someone can have a same experience, but the meanings that they have applied to that experience can all be slightly different, and they're all going to connect to different layers of emotions in you. Because when we talk about primary, secondary, and tertiary emotions, those three emotions, the hierarchy of how those emotions were programmed into your body, is the key to understand how you have programmed yourself, how you have experienced that those series of events. And each one of the emotions in those hierarchy, in the primary, secondary, and tertiary emotions, are basically taking you back to past memories where you have felt them. Okay. So in this example, person A can experience it as insignificant. So um, it could be, someone doesn't say hello properly or walks out of a room without saying goodbye. And a person that doesn't have a significant attachment to that behavior, that any of the senses can be triggered, by the way, in a trigger. Okay. So the trigger, when you're very unconscious of your triggers, it might be the lighting in the room, it might be the feelings, it might be the collective emotions of the people that are in a room that can trigger you to feel a certain way. It could be the color of their sweater that can trigger you to feel a certain way. So my point being that you need to, the more you get to know yourself, the more you're going to understand what your triggers are. But, the least aware you are, a lot of times it'll take some time for you to develop an understanding of what is actually causing and what kind of emotion is being triggered. Okay. Person B experiences abandonment with that same behavior. Person C experienced disrespect or humiliation, right? Person D, they might experience a loss of control. Okay, so hidden equations. The trigger exposes interpretation before interpretation has had time to disguise itself as reason. It reveals the hidden equation already existing inside us. For example, silence might equal abandonment. Criticism might equal inadequacy. Disagreement might equal rejection. Distance might equal loss. Authority can mean danger to someone. Intimacy means engulfment. These equations show consciousness exactly where freedom has not yet entered. The person has not experienced an alchemical understanding of what it looks like to embody the opposite of this. The body will react before the story appears. This is why the body is such a magnificent instrument in transforming and transformational science of your body. Your body really is a beautiful, beautiful advanced technology to help you understand how you respond to things, usually before you're even aware. Let's observe a genuine trigger carefully together. Okay, the body moves first. For example, the stomach contracts, the diaphragm tightens, the face becomes hot, the throat closes. You can't talk, you can't speak. The heart starts accelerating. The shoulders raise, the jaws harden, the body is preparing for confrontation. It's preparing for escape, survival mechanisms, appeasement, collapse, or withdrawal, fight, flight, or fawn. Okay. Fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, any one of these survival mechanisms. And these survival mechanisms, if you don't know about them, you might not realize that they are a survival mechanism to begin with. Then thought arrives after you recognize that contraction in the body. And thought begins to explaining the body. The story appears so quickly that we experience thought and reason and reaction as one event. And this is why being in the present, the concept of being in the present moment, is the complete reconnection with your body, the complete re-embodiment of your body, so that you can actually be deeply connected to the responses and the thoughts, and you can pause before you begin to observe how you arrive at the meaning as a result of that contraction or physical reaction. Okay, so they're not one event. They are two separate things. And if you can identify and learn to be aware of both of these aspects, your physical response and the emotional meaning that you apply to it, you can very quickly begin to master your body and your reactions, your environment. This is one of the most powerful keys to intuition. Okay. Our senses, our entire sensory system is dependent on where our attention is invested. If our attention is invested in one direction, all your life force is being put into that. Okay. And so you lose a lot of energy. And for intention, for these higher octave faculties, it requires a redirection of that energy. So between sensation and interpretation lies an extraordinarily important territory. This is where shadow work becomes conscious work. If awareness can enter this interval, the automatic sequence begins to loosen. The interval is the portal. That is the portal to the awareness. A trigger collapses psychological time. What's happening? The adult body may be standing in a room in 2026 while an emotional structure formed decades earlier has suddenly assumed command of perception. The person remains physically present. Psychologically, another age may be operating. Okay, when we have people, if you've ever noticed someone that is extremely emotionally immature, it's almost like they are reacting from this childlike part of themselves. They might be a full-grown person that is, well-dressed, put together, and the reaction is like a little tantrum of a little child. That is not random. The person is acting out the survival mechanisms that they have learned all the way back in that time. Okay, this explains why intelligent, mature individuals can suddenly behave in ways that seem inconsistent with their ordinary capacities. Their knowledge has not disappeared, their access to it has narrowed. Old intelligence is returning essentially. Under sufficient activation, perception becomes organized around one single question. What must happen now so that what happened before doesn't happen again? And by the way, this is if you have the data in your body. If you don't have the data in your body and you've never been able to answer this question, you will immediately go back and revert back to survival mechanisms, fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. Okay. And so we are looking at how to control, how to attack or withdraw, how to appease or silence, how to perform, create a performance that is going to create perfection, or we disappear. We want to completely run away. So these responses, when possessed, meaning the trigger reveals where there still possesses authority. You essentially become a slave to your triggers. Okay, and your entire personality, by the way, is built on these triggers. How? Our shadow enters through these projections. Triggers also reveal what consciousness has refused to recognize as its own, a quality that cannot be tolerated internally because extraordinarily visible externally. This is a territory of projection. Okay. Sorry, guys. My screen is messed up. One moment. Let me actually open this again. One moment. Okay, there we go. Sorry, my screen got frozen. Okay. So we're talking about triggers. Let me actually um, say that again. The quality that cannot be tolerated internally becomes extraordinarily visible externally. This is a territory of projection. What are we talking about? We are looking at the sub-layers of these triggers, okay? Disowned selfishness, for example. The person who has disowned selfishness, they might become consumed, just completely consumed by the selfishness of others. Someone that has the concept of forbidden anger, anger is not allowed. Okay, the person who has forbidden anger may experience angry people as intolerable. When we talk about the mirror, when we talk about the concept that you are what most triggers you, this is what we're talking about. And it doesn't mean that this is the case 100% of the time, because depending on where you're at in your awareness, you might be projecting more or less in your experiences. Okay. A person that has denied ambition, they can despise people that actually seek recognition. They could be completely triggered by that. Someone that sacrificed their needs, those who sacrifice their needs, they might resent those who freely prioritize themselves. Okay. So I want you to take a look at these and kind of look into your own life and think about the people that trigger you a lot and what they do. Okay, if you can break it down to kind of see what is the emotional behavior that is actually causing you a reaction. And I just want you to see what your personal relationship is with that. This is usually the hardest layer for people to crack because we feel very defensive about our beliefs. And we might be completely blinded to the idea that we actually have a thwarted relationship with selfishness or ambition or anger. We might not realize how deep our entanglement goes with these emotional experiences. And the question that you want to ask is, does this belong to me? You don't want to ask, does this question belong to me? You want to say, why does this particular quality acquire so much psychic charge inside of me? Remember that our psychic charge, that bioelectrical input that is fueled with emotions, is exactly what is responding to these experiences. Okay. Now, on the other side of this, and the most incredible part in DNA reprogramming is that when we are identifying, so This is basically the root of DNA reprogramming. This is exactly what we do in DNA reprogramming is identify the trigger, go back to the memory as far as we can, maybe even in the womb, and we begin to access that former fractal of yourself that had experienced that and begin to open up those emotional memory libraries. And what happens is that you begin to observe not only your mirror, but also the power that may have been disowned throughout your life, not just in that one experience. It could be many experiences. We tend to imagine that the shadow as containing only what is wounded, destructive, or shameful, but it also contains unused life. Exiled aggression. The child who learned anger threatened attachment may exile healthy aggression, which contains boundary, it contains movement, decisiveness, and the capacity to say enough. Okay, so how many of you have trouble saying no? How many of you have trouble creating powerful boundaries in your relationships and your life with people that might be toxic, codependent, parasitic, whatever it is? If you learned as a child that being angry is not allowed, you might be you might have a very thwarted relationship with anger and aggression, and you might be ashamed of that. And so there is a certain level of healthy anger, healthy aggression that is promotive of setting healthy boundaries. It doesn't have to be expressed through aggression, physical aggression or verbal aggression, but that life force is then utilized. It's applied into creating strong boundaries, firm, communications. Okay. Let's talk about exile of magnificent. The person who learned visibility, invited attack, may exile their own radiance and power. Okay, so if you learned that being seen or, being noticed was a cause to be attacked, picked on, abused, neglected, maybe you felt jealousy from others, all kinds of different things in whatever your personal experience was. You might be shameful. You might hide away all that radiance, all that power that is potential from you. Okay. Exile desire. The person who learned desire was shameful may exile eros, creativity, and aliveness itself. Okay, I really, really, really want you to think about these behaviors in your life and your relationship. These are super important examples because these are actually my most common through all the years that I'm working in therapy. These are the most common pain points that people touch. Okay. And all of this has to do with unlocking your spiritual potential because, and what do I mean by spiritual, but such an abstract word? We're just talking about your ability to come into harmonic order and experience deep internal peace, access your intuitive capacities, and be able to embody a balanced discerning abilities. Okay. So the person that exiled desire is experiencing a lot of shame. And another thing that I want to mention about this is that each of these emotions have different vibrational frequencies. We hold different energetic patterns in the body whenever we feel any one of these emotions. And so, as I talked about vibrational signature before, these become the vibrational signatures that attract and magnetize relationships, people, places, and things. Okay. Exiled authority. The person punished for independence may exile the capacity for self-determination. What does this person permit themselves to embody that I have forbidden in myself? This question can expose an entire hidden life. Okay, so I want you to take a moment to ground yourself. And we're going to do several little exercises throughout this presentation because it's a long presentation, but it's going to be a very proactive one. Okay. So I want you to take a moment to ground yourself for just a moment and really connect with your body. And I just want you to think of, in these 4 categories that I'm describing, if you might fall into any one of these: your relationship with anger, relationship with visibility, with desire, with the need for independence. And I want you to notice if you have been triggered by any one of these categories in your life. And who comes to mind when you think of these? Which one is the strongest that stands out? And then take yourself to notice who in your life triggers that emotion in you the most, that trigger. And I want you to ask yourself, what does this person permit themselves to embody that I have forbidden in myself? Just right there in that very quick movement of thought, you can access some extremely valuable information. Just right there, instantly. Okay. And if you continuously work like this, very proactively with yourself, it is so incredibly, amazingly powerful how quickly you will integrate yourself as you work through these triggers. Okay, let's talk about what happens in the body and the somatic anatomy of a trigger. We'll talk about the main energy systems of the body, but triggers must eventually be studied beneath language. Okay, because as you unpack primary, secondary, and tertiary emotions of triggers, you feel in your body where you are holding those emotions. And there's a very clear connection between each of those primary, secondary, tertiary emotions and the physical body. And of course, as you know, the body is self-organizing this information. The throat, what expression is being restrained? What truth feels dangerous to speak? Okay, so if you notice that any one of those previous emotions that we talked about were triggering a certain part of your body, these are some questions that you want to start to ask. The purpose is to develop literacy with your own organism, a deep reconnection with your body. Eventually, you can reorganize the patterns before your story becomes full form, full expression, full reaction. The chest, what attachment is threatened? What grief is moving beneath the surface? Take a moment to tune into that if you have a contraction in the chest. The solar plexus, where has agency been surrendered? What experience of humiliation or control has been activated? Notice how, of course, as always, these main systems are connected to your chakra bodies. And the themes and the vibrational frequency of each of these concepts emotionally are connected to those energy systems. The abdomen, what feels unsafe at an instinctive pre-verbal level? The jaw, what action is being inhibited? What words remain compressed and unsaid? And the pelvis, what desire, fear, vulnerability, or protective impulse has become guarded? Okay, your pelvis, your sacral, your throat, your solar plexus, your heart, and your third eye, your intuition. All of these are affected by any one of these areas. And of course, there are more connections, more profound connections in the body, but these are the areas of the body that are always the most contracted when we have a difficulty connecting to the body and to the emotions. Let's talk about the energetics of a trigger, and I'm going to expand more on these things in a moment, but this is just an entryway into the topic. In the language of energetic practice, a trigger is a rapid concentration of life force around an unresolved organization. Attention contracts. breath contracts, musculature contracts, perception contracts, energy becomes organized around defense. And the individual experiences this as an urgency. Something must be done. Survival. The more unconscious the trigger, the greater the compulsion to discharge its energy outward. This is really important. I want you guys to really register is that usually when the trigger is most unconscious, when you definitely don't realize that that is a trigger for you, usually our response and our reaction is the strongest. So as soon as I see that somebody has a very visceral response to something, it's very, very interesting and it's very obvious to kind of begin to observe that this is a very powerful pain point for the person. And this is also a key point of awareness in which you also begin to develop compassion and awareness of not only yourself, because you begin to realize how much life force you are spending in these unconscious reactions, but others also spend. And as I mentioned, we become enslaved by these triggers. Energetically, all of our attention is invested in them. To send the message, the whole purpose of these greater compulsions and to discharge the energy outwardly is to send the message and the relationship to defend, to explain, to attack, or disappear. The energy seeks completion through the old pathway. The point here is that we are always seeking completion. What is completion? It is the meeting of the unmet needs that were never met at that childhood state. Okay, so the key to break these cyclical patterns, this is ancestral. These are the mechanisms of ancestral repeated patterns. And the most beautiful, interesting thing about this, well, I find it beautiful, right? Some people find it, troubling. Of course, it's a troubling, reality is that we actually tend to memorize in the body the same way that the musculature is contracting for us. We also inherit that behavior down to our children. Okay. And so the child starts to pick up that heavy contraction in your belly that you were experiencing while the child was in the womb. Okay. Or when the child was born and you're a father that is just really anxious, your stomach is contracted, you're angry. The child begins to also mirror that kind of contraction because we are providing a perception, an environmental perception for that child. Okay, so something to note, this is how these ancestral traumas start to become memorized and they are recorded in the DNA epigenetically over time. Okay, no, depending on how severe these environmental triggers can be, we have entire generations that are affected by certain experiences, collective experiences. Okay. So again, the key to all of this, how to be free, is to be aware, present in the moment, fully in your body. Containment versus repression. Integration introduces another response possibility. Contain the charge without suppressing it. This is the key. This is the foundation of DNA reprogramming. When we repress or we refuse experiences entirely, containment persists, experience while suspending mechanical action. You feel completely, you remain embodied, you breathe, you observe. Life force that previously disappeared into automatic reaction becomes available to consciousness. I talked about this yesterday, that whenever we resist an emotion, it's going to get louder, louder and louder in the body. When you resist the truth, when you resist an emotion, when you resist something that you know, but you just keep doing it, or you just continue moving on with it, this is a betrayal to the self. And your body is so intelligent that it knows that, and it feels attacked by you, by your own behavior. So this is how you sever trust with yourself. You don't allow the experiences to unfold. And the purpose of your existence really is to experience fully. So this is where we start to create the foundation of internal wars with ourselves. We are at war with our authenticity. People always say, "Oh, I want to be authentic. I want to be okay." Well, you're never going to be authentic unless you truly understand the dynamics of a trigger, because in the study of a trigger is your freedom. It is your emotional energy, your reactionary, your body and physiological responses, your biochemical addictions and responses are entangled in these behaviors. The trigger contains belief. This is where we start unpacking the mental structure that is frozen or crystallized within the morphogenetic bioelectrical memory field of the body. Every reoccurring trigger contains a proposition about reality. The real work is to find that proposition by descending through the layers, peeling of the onion, getting to the root, getting to the primary core is what I live for in this work. And my invitation is that the more that you are following a path of truth or the path of love, this is how you get there. Okay. First of all, let's talk about at the surface level. The surface level is I'm angry. We have an immediate feeling. Okay. So we start at the center in this case, because this is you here at the center. It'd be great if I put a person there. Okay, so that's you at the center, okay? The surface emotion is I'm angry. Thought, judgments, and stories fueling the emotion. So as soon as you start to have an emotion, the back end process is that you immediately revert to the reactive thought, which is filled with judgments and stories that fuel that emotion. If you pause and begin to question the veracity behind these judgments and stories, the truth, and that is not something that you can do in an unregulated nervous system. I just want to be very clear. In order to do any of this work, you need to have a strong meditation practice to help yourself regulate the nervous system, because an unregulated nervous system is so overpowered through the chakra systems working overactively, your endocrine system excreting chemicals that are creating, cortisol and inflammation and stress and anxiety in the body. You cannot think clearly. You cannot pause. The pause becomes a distant thing that you all wish you were able to access. And this is why I invite you to have a very powerful meditative practice on a daily basis, at least an hour a day. Okay? Because again, what happens when you meditate? You are growing gray matter in the brain. Remember, if you're an overly emotional person, you're discharging a tremendous amount of bioelectrical charge throughout your day. You are operating in a centrifugal motion. Life force is depleting, expelling profusely from the body. And so to regulate and to quiet the logical mind that is trying to create constant judgments, stories, calculations that fuel emotional reactions, the pause is required. And that pause will allow you the ability to access the core belief. These judgments have layers. In the same way that this emotion has layers, primary is getting to the core belief. Secondaries are these judgments. Tertiaries are the surface emotion. Okay, so the tertiary emotion is angry. Then you realize underneath that anger is, let's say, judgments. So let's say it's insecurity, fear, anxiety. And then when you go deeper into those, the strongest one becomes insecurity in these reactive judgments. How do you access the core belief as you keep going? What's underneath the insecurity? Okay, underneath the insecurity is this incredibly powerful feeling of abandonment, betrayal. And then you are taken to a memory as a child where you learned that love must be earned and hidden false self-rule. We have to hide the real self. Okay? So this is the process of DNA reprogramming. This is what you are going through in DNA reprogramming. This is what we do to get to the core, because if you can't get to the core, you won't be able to change anything. Nothing will change. You won't be able to manifest. This is the manifestation engine right here. If you cannot learn how to alchemize the emotions through the judgment stories, the fueling bioelectrical charge, you can't get to the core. So when we carefully investigate a trigger, it can reveal more than months of abstract introspection. The wound is never simply an emotion. It is an organized belief system that has been quietly governing your perception. It's quietly creating overactive chakra system, energy systems. Okay, let's talk about what happens when we actually get to the memory and we start to identify the people that are involved. Okay, so let's say we are triggered and we see the person in front of us triggering us in any one scenario. This distinction is essential for mature shadow work. Inner work must never become a philosophy through which harmful behavior is rationalized. A person can genuinely violate your boundary and activate an old wound. Both can be true simultaneously. Questions that we want to ask when you get to these memories or when you're in the present moment of a trigger. What actually happened? You want to notice the observable factual event separate from interpretation. Number 2, what did my body remember? The somatic echo of old experiences activated by this moment. And let me just insert something here. This is really powerful process that I'm outlining here for you. And I want you to apply this to deja vus, flashbacks, memories, dreams, awakened states, meditation memories. This is how you work with the information. Number 3, what belongs to my story? The layer of reaction that belongs to you, not to this person. How much of this is you? How much did you take on that wasn't really yours? And also, how much of your reaction is a memorized reaction that you're just kind of, going through the motion of what you think you should be behaving like from a previous survival program? Number 4, what action is appropriate now? Discernment produces proportionate action. Reaction becomes perception. This is how you change your life in the present moment. There's a thing here that I'm simplifying things for you here because the step that will take deeper introspection in 1, 2, and 3 is that once you have gone through the primary experience, let's see what's happening right now, and you begin to unlock the memory, that's when your real work begins. Because it's actually in the memory that you can actually answer 3 and 4. Mostly 4, okay? When you go to the somatic echo of the old experience that's activated by that moment, that's where you're going to begin to identify what are the key traits of reaction. And when you go back to these memories as a child and you begin to see what happened with mom or dad and the abusive experience that happened there, and you start to relive those memories and you start to get very clear about how much of that experience you took on for yourself that wasn't yours. Maybe your dad's anger that wasn't really yours, but you took it on as yourself. You will absolutely need to discern what it looks like to apply a different action. And that's something that you have to teach yourself. This is not something that um, you are proactively going to know unless you learn how to quiet your mind. Okay? Because especially the older we are, we have, years and years of life experiences and very strongly reinforced neural memories about something. So you need to educate the body compassionately, lovingly on what it looks like to not hold father's anger. Okay, so what does that look like? What's the opposite of father's anger? Okay, let's say the opposite of anger is acceptance, absolute acceptance of your life, whatever's happening in that moment, whatever you are feeling about yourself without feeling fear of rejection of others or trying to control any situation. So in this case, you would have to embody acceptance. And you're only going to know how to apply this understanding of acceptance into an action if you teach yourself that. For majority of people, and I have worked with people that are 6 years old up into, 79 years old, 80 years old, actually 90, 95, 95. Yeah, my grandpa is also in there. But I've worked with people, and so what happens is that we actually don't even know these emotions. We're not familiar with them. That's the most incredible thing. So we don't know what it feels like to accept ourselves. We're not familiar with what that feels like. We don't know what it looks like to accept yourself in public, because we've played these masks and these defensive mechanisms for so long. And when I talk about the new human, when I talk about we are activating DNA, this is the work that activates the new DNA. It is the embodiment of the acceptance. It is the embodiment of this loving, compassionate state of being that you are now teaching yourself to embody. That is the key. We go from reaction to revelation. Eventually, the practitioner develops a different relationship with activation. A trigger appears, and alongside the reaction, there's an observation. Something has been touched. This changes everything. Instead of immediately becoming the wound, you begin witnessing the organization of the wound. You see the body contracting. You see the old conclusions arise. You see the defensive identity assembling itself. You see the impulse towards familiar behavior, and something within you remains present. This is the beginning of liberation, and it is the first time that you can begin to employ free will. Anything before this, you cannot access free will. You are merely repeating the patterns, ancestral trauma of mom, dad, and your entire ancestral lineage, societal structures, influences of society, so on and so forth. So this presence, this witness, this is the beginning of freedom. The trigger has not disappeared, by the way. And this is a misconception. A lot of people think, oh, you just do this one time and you're good. No, because do you know how many fractals of yourself and scenarios you've adapted this program to survive? Many. And in as many times as you have learned to modify yourself for survival, you have to teach your body and those many survival sides how to love or how to accept or how to be peaceful. Okay, and this doesn't take a lifetime. It just requires very deep connection with yourself, very deep presence with yourself. The difference is that consciousness has entered the mechanism rather than a complete disassociation with your body. You're no longer only the reaction, you are also the one watching the reaction form. That space, however small, is everything. And I'll tell you that when I first started practicing this, I began to realize that it's almost as if time would change for me in my experiences. It's almost as if time would slow down because when I would enter into a room or especially with family, as soon as you enter into a dynamic, a conversation, it's like I could tell 10 minutes before the person would open their mouth what they would say, not only because you develop an intuitive capacity, but because you're so connected to emotions and patterns and you're in such a state of awareness that you have already picked up physical, psychological, emotional, energetic cues from the person you're interacting with to the point where you're in such profound presence and observation that you know exactly how they're going to behave. Okay. And this is not from control. This is not manipulation. This is not from a place of, um, trying to be more powerful than another person. This is pure observation, non-judgmental. Because as soon as you start to judge, you're lost in your patterns again. Okay. It is that space that you create. The space becomes very full of information. Mhm. And when you experience this, it's very little to, um, be non-discerning of experiences. Like you just simply can't be blind to the things that are happening. So this is the most powerful protection, quote unquote protection. Okay, people talk about wanting to be protected. Okay, so I talked about the difference between fragility and protection. When we're fragile, we are completely disconnected, non-observant, reactionary. You're very fragile because it's very easily to break that because you're the slave of whatever you fear, of all the emotions. You're the slave of your story. You're the slave of your fears, and you're an easily impulsed by things. Okay, so that causes a tremendous amount of fragility. So I want you to allow yourself to get really nice and comfortable. And you're going to ground yourself. We're going to jump into the practice now as you allow yourself to connect with your body. Inhale deeply and exhale. I just want you to ground yourself. You're going to start running energy, come into reading state. Okay, for those of you that are new, grounding down to the center of the earth. And allow yourself to shrink the first three chakras. Breathing deeply, coming into the observer. You're going to go up into the heart and the throat and the third eye and expand the heart, throat, and third eye. As you begin to create a field around your body made out of something completely impenetrable, visualize yourself inside of a field of light. And I want you to draw all your attention from the external to the internal. Okay, so go ahead and allow yourself to disconnect from people, places, and things that you've interacted with today. Just draw all your attention back into your body, into the present. And you're going to start running energy. As you pull from the center of the earth, a powerful wave of green energy that comes rushing up into the body. Just imagine this beautiful, powerful energy coming up your legs as if you have straws that are drawing the energy up into the center core of your body, creating a vortex of energy at your center core. Breathing. From source, I want you to draw gold cosmic energy that comes down through the crown of your head, down your spine, combining with this green earth energy. And as you mix those two at your center core, visualize that you're cleaning up your field, picking up all the debris, all the heaviness, any stagnant emotions, blocked thought forms, blockages of any kind are being swept up in this swirl of green and gold around your field. See that now. Go ahead and take 10% of that green and gold back down to the center of the earth, eliminating all of the debris that you picked up down to the center of the earth. See that now. Go ahead and take 80% of that combination up your spine and from the crown of your head, coating the outside of your field. As you allow yourself to clear your relationship with the matrix. Breathing. I'm going to take that final 10% and bring it into the body, absorbing into the pores, the flesh, the muscles, the bones, into the cells of the body. With every breath you take, as you let yourself heal your body, nourish your body. See that now. That you're here. I want you to begin to observe your triggers in the past 7 days. And I want you to notice which one is the strongest of all these triggers. Take a look. Go ahead and find the strongest trigger. And take yourself there. And I want you to begin to observe what's happening in this trigger. I want you to notice yourself. I want you to take a look at who you're with and what is happening in that moment as you see this trigger. And only observing what actually happened. Don't try to interpret. Notice if you have a tendency to want to defend yourself or to make explanations or excuses in your mind. Just gently observe the experience as honestly, brutally honestly as possible. And as you are observing yourself, your facial features, you're observing them or the other or whatever else is occurring there external to you. I want you to focus on your body. I want you to connect with your body in that moment. And I want you to see, what did you feel physically? Take a look at your body, tune into your body. Notice how grounded you were or weren't in that moment. How connected were you to your body in that moment? What did you feel physically? What emotion appeared first? Notice the contractions of your energy field, your muscles. And as you gently begin to observe that, take a look at the narrative that your mind immediately created about the event as you observe your body. What did you fear was about to happen? What were you afraid would happen? What did you fear the most? And when have you felt this before? Take a moment to observe. Notice, what did you want to do immediately? What would that action have protected you from feeling? We talked about protecting parts of ourselves. What part of you is being protective in that moment? Take a look. You're going to take yourself back to the very first time that you felt this before. See how far back you can go. You can go as far back as the womb, whatever is most easily accessible to you. Maybe it'll take a couple different memories to get to the root. Allow yourself to see them. And as you see yourself there in that memory that you've chosen, you're going to do the exact same thing. You're going to observe your body, observe the event, notice the story that your mind created, and what were you most afraid of. And as you observe these experiences, I want you to ask yourself, what did this moment make me believe about myself? Stay with that question until something real surfaces. You don't need to give a polished answer or some survival response, but the one that most carries the weight in that experience. Notice how you repeat this pattern throughout your life. How often do you employ this belief to make decisions in your life, to form your personality? Take a look. And as you observe these other reactions and life experiences, I want you to ask yourself what part of your essence becomes available when you no longer need this protection. I want you to really focus on that. This wound is the entrance. Behind all defense is trapped energy. Behind trapped energy is capacity. Behind the capacity is a portion of the self that has been waiting to participate in life fully. Connect with that essence part of you. And I want you to observe how, in these memories, if you were to connect with the essence of you, how would you respond differently? If you no longer needed the protection, allow yourself to visualize as if you're watching a movie and you press pause and you infuse all of this release of protection to this part of you. And then you press play again. What happens next? How do they respond? How do others react? What's different in them? I want you to tune into their body, to the reactions of the body, thoughts, beliefs, emotions. Take a look at that. And as you allow yourself to get very acquainted with this different way of being, let yourself integrate everything that you've observed in your body. Let yourself familiarize yourself with this new belief system that you're creating and bring it back to this present week experience that you had and test it out again in this most recent experience, most recent trigger. What happens? Just observe. And as you integrate all these parts of yourself into your body, breathing, allow yourself to see yourself as one self, including all these changed parts, this new knowledge, and bring it into your body. Allow yourself to begin to clear your energy body from top to bottom, front to back, side to side. Let go of everything that you're holding on to, emotions of the week, day, month. Clear out your field. I want you to go up into your crown. Going to activate and expand your crown chakra. See that now. And as you see a room full of karmic contracts, you're going to dissolve those contracts in that room, clear it out. Allow yourself to begin to open the root, sacral, and solar chakra back into a balanced state. As you ground yourself back into your body, go ahead and bring yourself back into the room. And welcome back. So, I hope that this practice was able to help you understand how powerful the transformation of these triggers can be. Um, the whole point of this is to understand where you are being triggered, how you're being triggered. This activation determines your consciousness. It governs behavior, produces automatic repetition without awareness. Studying this kind of architectural structure of behavior, it's revealed by the trigger. When you're present enough, that action can deliver information without determining. So, we're going to go deeper now into how unresolved experiences capture life force, into the energetics, which is always so much fun. Let's talk about two perspectives. Life force can be understood in two complementary ways. Experientially, vitality, presence, creative potency. Okay, so this is the most important part of creative life force is understanding the amount of creative potential that is held within constant managing of unresolved and unconscious triggers. And embodied aliveness. Biologically, the real energetic demands of attention, autonomic activation, muscular readiness, endocrine signaling, and sustained defense states. These levels should remain distinct even when their phenomenology overlaps. The core observation, a trigger captures attention when extraordinary speed consciousness contracts around one event, one person, one possibility, one remembered danger. The field of perception that was available moments earlier now becomes very narrow, Okay, so we can no longer see. We are, I talked so many times about how we have a spectrum of human light that we can see. But if you are operating in survival mode, you're only looking at, let's say, red through yellow. You're not looking at purple, you're not looking at blue, you're not looking at indigo. You're only between red, orange, and yellow. And that's primarily where your energy is. It's your chakras are overactive in that sense because they are what dictate your perception. And so we move from availability, energetic availability, flexibility, which is what you learn in Qigong and Tai Chi, that when you are flexible, when you move life force fluidly through the body, nothing can touch you, nothing can hurt you, nothing can harm you because there's nothing solid to hit. When you are in defense, the vibrational frequency is so low, it's so heavy, it's so slow. That of course, there's so much density in the body, there's so much resistance and contraction that whatever comes your way is going to hit. It's going to hit you, it's going to hurt you. And so you lose this consciousness. You have a certain degree of freedom that's completely taken from that ability to co-create. This trigger recruits energy before consciousness understands why. So, of course, these are unconscious, subconscious behaviors. Okay. The trigger begins as mobilization. The eyes orient, the breath changes, muscles prepare, heart rate shifts, attention narrows, and the sympathetic nervous system can mobilize resources for action, while other defensive patterns may instead produce immobilization, withdrawn, or collapse. The difficulty begins when the present event has activated an unfinished pattern from the past. Now the organism may mobilize far more energy than the present. Okay. So again, you're looking at expenditure of life force when you are disconnected from your field is tremendous. Okay. So what happens in the energetics of coming into this level of energy cultivation? Even though a physical event may have ended, your organism is going to continue to spend your energy. This is the thing about this that is important for you to take away. Um, Even though psychologically you haven't processed why you're behaving that way, it's just an automatic reaction. You are spending a lot of energy in the past and the future, and the present, very little, but most of the energy in the present is expending from the body. Okay, and it's all about maintaining protection. That's what all of this is about. Hidden costs. Maintaining protection requires energy. Somatically, this may appear as muscular guarding. Recurrent muscular guarding. So, what do I mean by that? How many of you are constantly contracting your belly muscles, your abdominal muscles? How many of you constantly have that entire system just absolutely contracted? I just want you to check in with your body right now. And if your belly is contracted or you have anxiety, this is a really key understanding that your nervous system is unregulated, number one. Number two, all of your life force is contracted. If we look at the meridian system of the body, it's blocked. Okay. So if you begin to notice a person that is in survival mode, they have no connection to their source. Their source connection is very thin. Okay. Any unresolved states, something unfamiliar occurs with grief that cannot move, fear that cannot resolve, desire that cannot be acknowledged, and protective impulses that cannot become action. Okay. And so a lot of times, how many of you get home and you're just completely depleted? You're wiped out. And let's say you didn't even do that much today, but you are just absolutely exhausted. Okay. Please, I really want you to notice how many of you are just absolutely exhausted at the end of the day after dealing with a certain person, going to a certain place. Maybe it's your job, maybe it's, dealing with people, kids that are just constantly depleting. And it's not that it's the kids or the people. Again, it's the relationship that you have with the triggers in that moment. And so you need to work with these things. The external stimulus occurred once, the psyche reproduces the events many times, and the trigger has become an energetic loop. Energy no longer is available for perception. Okay, so perception is skewed, creativity, manifestation, magnetizing things that are in alignment with you in your best interest, relationships, and meaningful action. Okay. So you are off your purpose. You're not aligned with your purpose. You cannot be aligned with your purpose if you're in a constant state of survival. That's something that I don't think a lot of people talk about. If you are in a constant state of survival, you can't possibly be in your purpose because you are resisting. You're resisting your whole self. You're resisting your truth. Attention is one of the greatest carriers of life force. Wherever you put your attention, that, as the saying goes, where attention is, that's where energy is flowing. So be aware of what occupies your attention. Triggers can create centripetal organization. Okay, when you are regulated, you are when you are completely pulled towards the complete external, everything is triggering you from outside, you are depleting the life force completely out of the body. And just really quick touch on fragmentation. Once again, the link to fragmentation, why I wanted to talk about it first is because this is why fragmentation happens. Okay. Triggers are the reason why. So, to understand how to stop fragmentation, how to reverse fragmentation, you want to work with your triggers. Okay. The integration is actually the most powerful element of putting together all the aspects of yourself like you did. And you'll notice that at the end of this meditation, when you integrated those aspects of yourself, it's like life returns, energy returns. Even if you had a long day today, you have regenerated your energy. You have recycled it and utilized it. Once again, sometimes meditation can be more powerful working on a trigger than 10 hours of sleep. Okay, so pay attention to this kind of shadow work. It's the key to a lot of healing. Every defensive identity requires maintenance. The false self is energetically expensive. Every identity requires selective inhibition, and inhibition requires ongoing organization. Let's talk about the agreeable person, right? The people pleaser must continuously monitor the emotional state of others. This is ultimate control. Okay. And it's funny because when we don't think deeply about the layers of emotions, we don't understand the connection between a people pleaser and control until you really take a look at that. You might think that they're the nicest person, and that means that they don't try to attain control or they're not controlling. But actually, it's one of the most controlling archetypes because the people pleaser has to control other people's opinions of themselves, other people's reactions, make sure they are avoiding rejection, make sure they control events so that they can look good or be a good person, be seen as good, right? I want you to take a look at your life, and if you've ever played that people pleaser role, how much energy did that take? You might not even realize how your actions are linked to being a people pleaser. Maybe you're juggling family members to make them all be okay with a certain situation. Maybe you're trying to, avoid conflict by staying quiet about truths that need to be spoken. Okay. The perfectionist most continuously monitor performance for any sign of inadequacy, right? So the perfectionist has to be absolutely perfect all the time, the way they look, the way they present, the way they talk, because they have to make sure nobody can ever reject them or point out a weak spot. any one of this, again, it's a play of control. And control is an illusion because you cannot absolutely control anyone, even if you're absolutely perfect, even if you're the people pleaser. Somebody might be having a bad off day and you don't meet their expectations. How much of your life force is spent in that? Okay, there's a depletion of life force, and it's a futile um, game to play with anyone. Hyper independent must suppress the need for support and connection. Okay, how many of you are hyper independent? You don't want to ask for help. You're afraid of asking for support. You're afraid of connection, or really at the root, you're afraid of intimacy. You're afraid of being seen. Truly, you're afraid of being vulnerable. Okay. And if you go deeper into that, you can connect it with shame. You can connect it with fear of abuse, whether it's neglect or abandonment, any number of different layers that you have arrived at this fear of connection and support. I want you to observe that. How does your life revolve around that hyper independence? The invisible person, they must suppress expression, visibility, and natural presence. Okay, so the invisible person is just constantly making sure that they are controlling their expressions, their reactions to things, not too loud or not too quiet, and managing visibility. Okay. Energy previously used to maintain an identity becomes available to inhibit life. This is one reason profound integration can eventually produce and express an experience of increased vitality. Health, immunosuppression that was once suppressing your immune system can be released. You can heal illnesses. All of these are connected to somatic roots. Okay, as always, for years, I'm talking about Louise Hay's dictionary on the illnesses and their somatic meaning. There's another amazing dictionary by Everett Rose that I highly recommend on illnesses connected to the somatic root. Okay, begin to study yourself. Whatever physical imbalance is occurring in the body is deeply connected to one of these archetypal layers. And we do have 12, 13 different archetypal layers. This trigger slowly attracts where life force is imprisoned. Okay. The shadow contains rejected potency. Their embodiment touches a capacity within you that has been exiled. The trigger illuminated the location of your unused life force. This is why some of our strongest triggers surround people who embody what we have forbidden ourselves to become. Beauty, authority, sexuality, freedom, visibility, intelligence, tenderness, power, creativity. I want you to pay attention to who is triggering you once again and understand why that is happening. And actually, let me clarify that when I talk about a mirror, when people say, "Oh, is it true that your abuser is a mirror?" This is what we're talking about. Okay? We're not saying that you are the abuser, like that person is abusing. It's these under layers that are the resonant frequency of emotion. Okay. So, for example, in this example, at the surface, the irritation beneath judgment, beneath envy, beneath grief, beneath I abandoned my own authority years ago because expressing it threatened belonging. So, when this becomes available, you can understand it wasn't about the other person, it's about you and your behavior towards you hindering your expression. And sometimes the lack of awareness of our triggers can lead us down dangerous paths. Remember the law of accident. We call upon an experience that wakes us back up into alignment, into a very rude awakening, into a deep introspection of what our core beliefs about ourselves actually are. Okay. So again, transmutational process of an observation is for you to understand, first of all, what is activating the trigger, observation, and then of course the alchemy of the trigger, as we did today, is to observe what you need. Who are you without that? Find your essence. That is the core of pure creation. Your attention returns to the things that need your attention for creation. You begin to regulate the nervous system, you can breathe. And I guess one of the key things of this slide is, sorry, come back to this. Desire clarifies. Imagination becomes available for creation rather than catastrophe, because most of the dreams that we have and the experiences that we call upon ourselves are going to be challenging that trigger. Okay. Yeah, so we kind of already went through that, so I'm just gonna move on to let's talk about the biology of the trigger. Okay, and again, you guys can have these slides in the replay information if you sign up to the event, okay? And you can spend as much time as you want studying in them and researching them. They're really awesome tips and tools. I find myself reverting back to some of these slides sometimes. Number one, the amygdala assigns threat significance. Okay, so your amygdala participates in learning which stimuli predicts danger or emotional significance. After strongly threatening experiences, seemingly small features associated with the original event can acquire salience. Okay, a particular voice or tone, someone becoming quiet, being ignored or overlooked, a door closing or slamming, a facial expression. These triggers, they feel very convincing. The body may already be prepared for danger before the consciousness knows that what it thinks is wrong, and the heart accelerates, the stomach contracts, the mind concludes, see, I knew something terrible was happening, and we're hyper vigilant. Okay, in trauma psychology, if you are recovering from a severe trauma, chances are, or if you had an abusive parent, narcissistic parent, emotionally immature parent, you're usually hyper vigilant, constantly monitoring environments and monitoring yourself and monitoring environments, hyper vigilantly, always expecting something to happen. And of course, something will happen because in the quantum field, you're literally expecting that. You are co-creating that. Physiologically becomes evidence for the story. Okay, so let's go a little deeper into this. The sympathetic nervous system mobilizes. Okay, so your emotions are bioelectrical charges. When the brain predicts threats, autonomic regulation can shift towards defense mobilization. The sympathetic nervous system increases readiness for action, which is contributing heart rate, alertness, and cortisol, all kinds of chemicals that are creating this constant stress in the body. Okay. If you are in constant hypervigilance, and there's a big difference, I want to be very clear between observation and hypervigilance and, survival. Okay. Observation is a non-judgmental. You're not applying meaning to what you're observing. Hypervigilance is a constant preparation, waiting for something that you expect to happen. So you've already applied meaning. The difficulty comes when symbolic or relational cues repeatedly recruit a survival level response. Okay, so what happens in the body is that the HPA axis recruits cortisol, which means that the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and the adrenal cortex, these are spiritual organs of the body. Okay, what do I mean by that? When these energy systems are overloaded or depleted, you literally are blocking your higher faculty energy system. Okay, cortisol helps mobilize energy and coordinates adaptation to stress. It is essential biology. It's not the problem. But the issue is that the repetition of this constant running in the body as a result of poorly resolved activation. When stress becomes recurrent or chronic, HPA axis regulation can become altered. Cortisol patterns can become elevated, flattened, poorly timed, and otherwise dysregulated. That distinction matters enormously for understanding chronic triggering. What am I talking about? Chronic illnesses. Okay. Chronic illnesses, the suppression of your immune system, because your metabolism will change as a result. So if you have a lot of stress, you have a lot of digestive issues, stomach issues, your body can't absorb nutrients. Many of those somatic roots are in this constant state of hypervigilance. Okay. The body makes a logical decision under threat. Immediate survival receives priority. Okay, so stress hormones help make glucose and other metabolic resources available, directing energy towards systems required for immediate adaptation. So when this occurs briefly, the organism generally it recovers. When the threat activation becomes recurrent, the metabolic consequences become more complicated. It's not giving the body enough time to recover. This is an important mechanism for us for survival. But if you are in a constant state of being triggered by the things around you, let's say you're scrolling, you're doom scrolling, right? And you're 1 minute you're looking at this video that makes you cry. Next moment, you're watching a terrible accident that happened in the world. Next moment, you're watching some spiritual information. Your body is just going on a roller coaster biochemically of responses. And as you know, your poor body doesn't know the difference between the imagination, you might be fantasizing something, or you might be watching something, or you might be actually in danger. Your body won't know the difference. Your body is responding the same thing. Okay. So what happens in the body as a physiological effect is that we have altered insulin sensitivity and appetite regulation. It becomes affected. So those of you that have trouble regulating your appetite or are dealing with insulin issues, sugar cravings of any kind, really, because the body will ask for resources because it's in survival. Okay. Visceral fat accumulation, of course, cardiovascular strain over time, metabolic dysfunction. Okay. So when we're talking about a trigger and I'm talking about consuming life force, this is what I'm talking about, the embodied element of it. The organism is literally changing how biological resources are allocated. So when we talk about self-love and compassion, this is what we need to become aware of. And this is actually one of the most powerful things that helped me learn to love myself, is to become soberingly aware of this process. Because when you really care about your body and you realize the amount of suffering that your body has to go through in an unregulated nervous system that is constantly emotionally reacting to things that are making you angry, things that piss you off, things that, trigger you left and right, your body is like a punching bag to your unconsciousness. Okay, so a first act of self-compassion is to be aware of this so that you can calm and pause before your body is reacting in that way. And as I mentioned before, the body reacts before. Okay, let's go talk about digestion issues. This is the number one issue that I have in my practice is people have digestive problems as a result of unprocessed emotions, unregulated nervous system, suppression of anger, especially suppression of anger, especially with all the things that are happening in the world today. We are constantly being bombarded with highly controversial, irritating, triggering information. It is designed for this reason. There are many ways to create a spiritual war, as people want to call spiritual war. One way is the manipulation of your emotional resources. Okay. And so if you're, you can look at the statistics of illnesses, um, you know, as best as we can believe these statistics that are properly done, not bought by certain organizations, real statistics of like actual issues in the world. How many people have more severe immune system problems? Okay. So, any number of these symptoms that you might be having, the gut is not merely responding psychologically, it's participating biologically in a stress response. It's a full body event, it's never just a mental event. The problem with the effect on the immune system that is really important to understand, and I think that the pandemic was a fantastic um, it was a fantastic, what should I call it? Example of this process. Okay. That when we have a severe amount of threat and stress, immune regulation becomes very difficult. Okay. So immune regulation communicates biodirectionally. Short-term stress can produce adaptive immune changes that are helpful. Okay, so we can, for example, working out, right? You're stressing the muscle, breaking the muscle in order to build that muscle. Okay, and some stress is good to help us evolve, to help us do things that we need to do, complete our tasks. But chronic stress is a completely different thing. It's persistent stress, unconscious states of ungrounded and disconnect with the physical body. And this can signal and alter inflammatory regulation and immune function. And research has associated chronic psychological stress with increased inflammatory signaling, of course, right? So, an important nuance, this doesn't mean that unresolved emotions straightforwardly cause disease, okay? Our biology is more complex, and we talk about other somatic roots of illnesses, but it does play a tremendous role in that. The trauma flywheel. Prediction, not memory. The feedback loop that forms stronger expectations. We're going to talk about expectations on a whole other video because expectations is one of the most confusing elements of trauma that we have as a major archetypal pain that we experience as humans being individuated from source temporarily. Okay, we have certain expectations for the things. But when we expect threat, okay, when we have a constant expectation of a threat, of being hurt, of being rejected, of being neglected, abandoned, our attention is actually searching for that. We actually become curious because we're so powerful creative beings that we become curious of these things that we know and we expect. So the body is constantly looking for that. This is how you create resonance. This is actually a really fantastic wheel to show you how we come into resonance with things, okay, bioelectrically and biochemically. Remember that resonance is not just an energetic thing, it's biologically, it's a biochemical function which creates bioelectrical charge in the body, which then creates a magnetic system. Okay. And then, thought forms turn into photons, so on and so forth. This is an entire system of this incredible attraction energy that we then create. Co-creation. This is the system of co-creation. Okay. And when we confirm this belief, which we will, because that's exactly what we're looking for, in the same way that if you expand your range of intuition, you can begin to attract other things, other visions. You see more. And some people get scared. You also experience um, another level of the spectrum. Okay. Let's talk about the hippocampus, which provides a context. The hippocampus contributes to contextual and episodic memory. Remember, we talked about the hippocampus when we talked about bioelectrical memory. This is helping us distinguish where and when something occurred. Under severe or prolonged stress, contextual processing can become less effective. For example, if you have a severe trauma, you might block the memory of these experiences. The organism may therefore respond strongly to something resembling the past, even though the present context is fundamentally different. Okay. So another point to my point, another extremely important example to my point about how we create networks of information. And I just want to connect this with DNA because the hippocampus connection of this episodic memory system, it's a bioelectrical system in the holographic field. We imprint and we inherit these into our generations. Collective trauma is holding bioelectrical charges that are then inherited into the next generation. Okay, so the body recognizes this resembled danger. Let's talk about war victims, for example, that have gone through severe innumerable amount of trauma. And then the children 10 generations down are, let's give you the example of that was studied in a research that was super interesting about how survivals of the plague, descendants of the plague, were absolutely terrified of mice. Why? Rats or mice. Please forgive me if I'm incorrect about the exact species, if it's a mice or rats. I believe it's rats. But um, what happened is that in the plague, what spread the plague were the mice. Okay. And this was studied over many generations. These are the memory imprints, and that's not random, you guys. When I talk about incarnation into certain bloodlines, this is what I'm talking about. We incarnate into certain bloodlines to experience certain archetypal lessons that we've not transcended, we've not integrated within ourselves. And even illnesses and people that have, let's say, the hippocampus affected, memory blocks about things is also an archetypal lesson. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. Sorry, guys, been talking all day. Really happy to be talking though. Okay, let's talk about the prefrontal cortex, which temporarily loses regulatory influence. Under strong emotional activation, executive function can become less effective, affecting reasoning, impulse control, perspective taking, working memory, decision making, and the ability to consider multiple interpretations simultaneously. So this is a really powerful slide. I know all my slides are so powerful. This stuff is just so exciting because the correlation of this when you are going into deep introspection into your memories is amazing. Under strong emotional activation, we can block our incredibly important senses system. Okay. And so here's the thing. I've mentioned many times that the new human that we talk about, the activation of DNA, what are we talking about? The survival model that we once abided by is needing to change. Because when we are in a state of chronic survival, all of the tools, your activated abilities, your activated senses, your intuition, your telepathic capacity, your ability to connect to nature and to the earth cycles and systems and the communications that earth has for you to protect you, provide you data, is blocked. We're disconnected from the senses. And one of the biggest epidemics of our time is that we no longer come into being and sensing. We are no longer refining the art of senses. We want to resist feeling, knowing. We want to avoid feeling. And that's a problem because we actually are caught up in biochemical addictive loops of survival rather than the amplification of your senses and the mastery of the regulation of the nervous system in order to expand your range of capacity. Okay. So, what happens when you're triggered? And this is where I learned the difference between fragility and protection. Okay. Survival and fragility. When you are come into vulnerability and authenticity, let me let me correct what I'm saying here. When you come into vulnerability, when you come into authenticity, you might feel vulnerable. There's this misconception that you are vulnerable, and vulnerability is a dangerous thing. But there is a difference between vulnerability and fragility. Okay. When we're fragile, you are operating by a survival mechanism that is disconnected from your senses, your awareness, your higher faculties. So when you become triggered, you say or do something. Hours later, you think, why couldn't I see this clearly at the time? Because you were operating from a different neurophysical state. Your intelligence did not disappear. Your access to certain regulatory capacities changed. In my intuition class 101, this is the number one thing that we want to learn how to work with. It replaces self-judgment with self-compassion, replaces confusion with, let's say, a map, some guidance, some reference for you to understand. Okay, so also this speaks to mistakes, right? So people that have experienced, somebody talked about being in an abusive relationship. How do I forgive them? And we talked about self-forgiveness. This is one of the most difficult things when you betray yourself over and over again, when you're doing something that you know you shouldn't be doing or isn't good for you. You're constantly betraying yourself. Okay. And so the compassionate thing is to reconnect with that part of you and to begin to come out of survival so that you can see clearly what is actually happening to you. And as long as you're fogging this prefrontal cortex with all of these survival biochemical exertions, you can't do that. Okay. So muscles begin to carry defensive strategy. I talked a lot about how building muscle is very important along your journey to spiritual cultivation. What do I mean by spiritual cultivation? Long hours of meditation, beginning to come into a state of presence and observation in the presence of cultivating higher conductivity, bioelectrical conductivity in the body. The body needs stronger body. Okay. And that's a topic that on a superficial level, it might seem ridiculous, but it's something that you learn with time. And we learn by observing, what the organism needs in order to sustain higher octaves of frequency. Every survival response has a motor component. Fight prepares particular muscular patterns. Flight prepares others. Freezing involves another configuration. Protection postures may repeatedly involve the jaw, the neck, the shoulders, the diaphragm, abdomen, pelvic floor, and fascial musculature. The habitual pattern, if activation repeatedly occurs without sufficient recovery, elevated muscular guarding can become habitual. Eventually, the person may no longer recognize contraction as contraction. It becomes their baseline. Okay, I really experienced this when I went through a tremendously traumatic experience. I could not relax my muscles for years after. It took a long time, and it was unbelievable having gone from being completely regulated to a complete dysregulation. It's amazing how this beautiful, intelligent body responds to life experiences. I want you to take a pause and take a look at, if you've been through traumatic experiences, how it's affected your contractions of your muscles. Are you aware of the patterns of contractions in the muscles that you carry? The body carries the shadow, guys. Okay, so when we talk about shadow work, I'm not just talking about some intangible concept of shadow work. I am talking about pure integration and embodiment. because the nervous system may repeatedly reproduce this learned motor and autonomic response. It's associated with history, it's associated with your ancestral bloodline, and the repeated patterns that you keep resurfacing. You cannot move anywhere in your awareness if you don't do shadow work, because you will be stuck in a loop and you won't understand why. Okay. What's going to help you break? Breathing. Okay. So breathing is the key. People don't realize that breathing is actually your ability to master life force. Okay, so the activation of your faculties is all based in your relationship with breath, because breath, air, is the ocean of life force, which is surrounding you, everything, giving life to everything. We have a very symbiotic relationship with plants and trees. We don't understand that because we're so disconnected from the earth and from nature. But when we're disconnected from nature, most of the time your breathing is extremely shallow. Okay, you're in a box, you're in a concrete box, you're never connecting with these natural cyclical systems. Okay, so the loop triggers frequently alter respiration. Breathing may become faster, shallower, upper chest dominant, irregular, or temporarily held. Changes in breathing when feed information back into the nervous system. Breathing then feed information back into the nervous system, influencing carbon dioxide levels, bodily sensations, heart rate dynamics, and perceived anxiety. Threat changes breathing. Why breathing matters is because when you interrupt these escalating activations of anxiety, how many of you get panic attacks? Okay. After severe trauma, I would get panic attacks. The only thing that saved me from panic attacks was learning how to breathe. Literally count those breaths. And it is one of the few autonomic processes that can be consciously influenced, making it one of the most accessible entry points into the nervous system during a trigger, guys. So, and don't think that this is for severe trauma. This is like the guy cut you off in the freeway. Okay. Breathe and then see what happens. Okay. Um, let's talk about sleep and recovery. Let me see. I only have a couple more slides, guys. Hang in there with me. Almost done. I told you this was going to be a long one. Okay. But there's so much to say. Okay. But anyway, sleep and recovery can become impaired, and sleep is absolutely essential to our ability to recover all of these systems. And from the deep spiritual perspective of that, when I talk about spiritual, I'm talking about the non-physical realm, from which is larger than the physical. We are these organisms that are, when we come into coherence with earth and the circadian rhythms of the earth, the body regulates. That's why going into nature is one of the most powerful tools for healing. Okay, the organism remains vigilant after the external event has entered. Recovery becomes difficult. Rumination continues. Muscle tone remains. You just can't sleep. When you have severe traumas and severe stress, you start having nightmares and you can't even sleep. This is a very known thing. When you have PTSD or, any kind of post-traumatic stress syndromes, your body is just completely frozen in that continuous loop. And so to break that, we have to learn to regulate the nervous system. And this person in this picture is having a nightmare with 3 arms already. Oh my God. Allostatic load begins accumulating. Okay, so really, really important. There's a difference between allostasis versus allostatic load. What am I talking about? Allostasis is a process through which the body maintains stability by changing its physiological state according to demand. This is a healthy and necessary thing. Okay. Allostatic load is describing a cumulative wear associated with repeated prolonged adaptation. When the system designed to protect life begins consuming increased resources, simply maintaining protection Okay. This is powerful. This is a powerful model for chronic triggering, and a compelling case for why integration is not a luxury, but a genuine act of biological stewardship. Imagine an alarm system that functions perfectly but is activated 20 times a day. The problem is not the alarm, the problem is the cost of repeatedly mobilizing the entire building. Okay, just think of that for a minute. Um, so speaking to self-reinforcing these loops, each time a trigger produces the same interpretation and defensive response, the pattern can be reinforced through learning. Eventually, and even internal sensations can become triggers. A racing heart triggers fear, and this is where we start to, have panic attacks, and um, even, we can experience creating illnesses, in the body as a result of these kinds of dysregulated patterns. Okay. The accelerated heart forms danger. It confirms danger. And this is one way psychological conditioning becomes fully embodied. Okay. So again, the point of this is to come back to compassion. Okay. Integration changes the prediction. This is really the most important because integration is way deeper than just intellectually understanding the past, revisiting your informations. Integration actually, it's not really about the past revisiting. It's absolutely about the embodiment of a different pattern of information. It's creating a new experience. And this is something that a lot of people don't understand, that how do you actually create lasting change is by teaching the body to embody the opposite of what you learned. This is healing. This is 100% DNA reprogramming, what I do every single day for you to learn how to embody the opposite. Okay. As we did in the practice today, integration of these new patterns is the rewiring of neural pathways. It's the regulation not only of the nervous system, but of the energy field. It's allocating energy to other chakra systems so that our perception can change. So let's start at the beginning. The cue appears, right? The activation begins, a familiar signal arrives. Okay. Context is recognized, choice remains available, boundary may be expressed, support may be received. When a person remains present, the body experiences activation without automatically completing the familiar defense sequence. The feared catastrophe does not occur. The nervous system receives new information, and under appropriate conditions, the previously learned association can be updated. The memory doesn't need to disappear about your experiences. However, you can change the way you experience the past in your body. What does Gabor Mate say? Well, I love the one thing that he says that's so magnificently important and poignant, that it's how you responded to the trauma that hurt you, not the trauma itself. And this is true because what I see in my practice every single day is people have become their abusive father. People have become the abusive mother. People have become to themselves, which is the worst, because you have no one to call it out. You have no one to identify it unless you sit with yourself to identify that. Okay. So this is where we begin to change that. And the way to change that is that you no longer you become the parent that you needed towards yourself. You become the friend that you needed the lover that you needed for yourself. And your life then begins to change. Body begins to change. Biologically, what does integration mean? You remember without becoming. The person can remember without becoming the memory. Don't get stuck in the story, as I say a million times. Don't Go back to the emotional memory and replay the emotions in your body. That's not meditation, by the way. That's not any practice. You need to move out of that state into an observer so that you can receive the insights of that experience, so that you have some gold, some raw material to work with and turn to gold. That's the alchemy, right? Feel without losing ground. Always stay grounded. Come into pure presence. Recognize without generalizing. Recognize genuine danger without finding danger everywhere. This is the quickest way to clear up your discernment, to build trust in yourself. Activate without surrendering. Experience activation without surrendering consciousness to it. Okay. So you don't need to fall into the loops of the experience of being triggered every single time. The past becomes information rather than command. Integration releases the present from the compulsory repetition of the past. Okay. So just take a look at how you have been affected by these life experiences. And it's just really, really powerful. And that brings me to the end of my presentation today. I want to thank you so much for joining me. I know it's a long one. Am I even still live? I don't know. Yeah, thank you so much for joining me, guys. It was such an honor to have you here. If you guys have questions, you can put it in capital letters. I'll be really happy to answer it. And if you guys want to participate in receiving the slides, you guys can do so by going to my website. I will leave you here with this thought, and I hope it supports you and helps you. And I will see you for day 7. We're on to day 7 now. Okay. So have an amazing night, and I will see you soon. I love you guys. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much for that super chat, Mark. That is so sweet of you. Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Josepha. Thank you, C. Astrid, thank you so much. I'm so grateful for your efforts to teach us and share what you know. I'm being helped so much. Share your gift of articulation and your generosity. Thank you so much. Love you. Elliot Gordon, so great to see you. Wonderful to see you. This is so eye-opening. Thank you so much. Ego game, mind game, power struggle. Yeah, both victim. What is the karmic consequences of an abuser? Hi, PJ. I think I answered that question already for you, PJ. How does karma? I answered that one already. Bending stars view so much does not apply typically when they're dealing with auto brewery syndrome. Have you helped anyone with ABS? I'm not sure I know what that is. I'll look it up. Let me see. Shouldn't we play the role of an abuser being abused and do whatever? Abuse is sitting and healing. Whether I want as an abuser, I can decide to heal. Yeah, the invitation is to have compassion with yourself. So whatever you um, choose compassion towards yourself first. Don't worry about the abuser. You need to worry about yourself. Now that you are safe away from the abuser, um, in your particular case, I know your case, that's why I'm talking about this like this. But you can learn to be compassionate towards yourself. Okay. Thank you so much. All right, guys, you guys are amazing. I love you guys. I adore you too. Mark, thank you so much. This was incredibly eye-opening. I will apply this to my practice immediately. Acu, a cup of fantasy. Thank you. Love you guys. Love your messages, and I will see you soon. Much love. Bye.